I know how this is going to sound. And I'm not trying to scare you, and I'm not going crazy. MCDM is making an RPG,
The keywords
and they're calling it
tactical, cinematic, heroic, fantasy.
cinematic. What does that mean? I don't know. But I'm gonna find out.
Specifically, what does cinematic mean in the context of a TTRPG? Okay, I want you to do me a favor. Just for a few minutes, let's stop thinking about running and prepping our games like we're writing a novel. Almost every DM I know has their debut novel cooking in some capacity, whether it's been published or just an idea that they have. I love writing. I love writers. This is not my anti-novelist video. But, just for right now, let's think about our games like they are movies. Cinematic is one of those words that has been dragged out to mean so many different things. At this point, the dictionary definition is useless to us. It can mean huge, it can mean intense, it can mean moody, it can mean atmospheric. A slow zoom in to a character's eyes as they contemplate drastic action is cinematic. Hans Zimmer music is cinematic. A mysterious stranger lit only by the embers of their pipe is cinematic. A sweeping drone shot is cinematic. Just kidding, I don't have a drone. Maybe you're getting sick of this word. Let's put it away for just a minute and we'll get out this one instead. Ooh, what is it? We know intuitively when something is that word we're not saying right now because the emotions and tone that it conveys are intentional. One of my favorite examples of this that's not a movie is a painting called Nighthawks. It evokes a profound sense of loneliness, not just for the subject of focus, a lone man sitting at the corner of a diner bar, but also for you, the viewer, the voyeur, standing across the street in the dark looking through this window. That's why people feel so drawn into this painting. It is intentional to the composition. Okay, we can get this word back out now as long as you understand that when I say this, I mostly mean this.
Intentional.
And if we keep using this, like we have been, it's gonna go to the nothing word graveyard with liminal and epic. So what does MCDM mean when they call their upcoming RPG cinematic?
When we say cinematic, we mean visual. When you read how your abilities work, you can picture your character doing these things. And your class abilities encourage the kind of over-the-top, theatrical heroics you see in action movies.
I think it goes a little bit deeper than that. Let me tell you a story. The year is 2006. The stars are aligning in a very magical way. You see, all the televisions in the world are taken up by grandmas playing Wii bowling because Nintendo's primary target audience is gamers 40 to 80. Therefore, I have been jaunted into the analog world, and I only care about one thing now.
Yu-Gi-Oh! It's time to duel!
As a feral game store teen, I am adopted into a D&D group. Our DM, whose anonymity I shall protect by calling him Drew, is a pretty cool guy. He's running an adventure for us. Maybe you've heard of it. It's called Ravenloft. Now, Drew thinks in scenes. For him, telling any story is about traveling from one capital M moment to another, and those moments are clear to him from the outset. In fact, it's the only prep he does. He would draw them. Now, 2024 Skylar knows that these are called storyboards, but before each game, he would draw out these rough sketches of our characters staring down from a cliff top as a village is overrun by wolves. I think he actually got some of them from movies, like pausing the movie, putting paper over the screen, and tracing it. What's more, he wasn't just making these scenes up from nothing. In Ravenloft and its future iterations, you do a pseudo tarot spread at the beginning of the campaign to determine when and where pivotal things will occur. If you draw a king or ace when determining Strahd's goals, that means one of the PCs, a random fighter, that's me, has the Sun Sword. So I found myself being choked, dangled over the edge of a balcony by Strahd friggin' von Zarovich, and when both of us are illuminated by a flash of lightning, his eyes dart to my hip. They widen in shock, and in that moment, both of us realize that rusty old antique I've been carrying around on my hip, it's the friggin' Sun Sword. And as he is still in shock, I draw it forth, ignite it, and chop his arm off. The memory of that scene has music for me. I can hear the wind roaring in my ears as I fall. I can feel an ache in my shoulder as my momentum jerks to a sudden halt. I can honestly say that in Drew's games, his intentional moments of action were so cinematic. In his head, there were colors and camera movements. There was music. It felt, to us, like it was projected on a 50-foot wall with Dolby surround sound. He didn't do any crazy voices. He didn't use any music or sound effects. He never wore costumes. He never brought in any props. He didn't write any monologues. We barely used a battle map. Speaking as a fan of all that extra stuff, I am mesmerized that Drew's games were as good as they were. Now, 18 years and thousands of hours of DMing later, I understand why it worked. See, what Drew was doing, even if he didn't think of it this way, was making sure that the narratively and mechanically necessary parts of the game didn't just enable the fantasy, it amplified it. And these movies just made themselves in our heads. Thanks to my early experiences with D&D, with Drew, I also think in scenes, usually one major scene, and work backwards. I have a storyboard style journal spread that I use to prep my games, which paid members of all tiers can get over at patreon.com/ADHDM. They also saw this video a day early, and they got the storyboards I used to shoot this video, if anyone wants to see those for some unknown reason. All of that to say, the more things that we intentionally put in the game, both the games that we are merely running and the ones that we are designing, I know you've got a TTRPG cooking, you can't fool me, to amplify the fantasy, the more cinematic they will be. Put another way, imagine if the mechanics and the language used in your game evoked the same feeling as adventure titles and cover art. If things evoke scenes in our heads, we get excited to use those things as players. And as game masters, that's an easy place for us to devote more time and energy for efficient and awesome prep. The MCDM RPG is using this technique, but it's not completely new. A ton of really well-known games are already doing it. Games you've probably played. It's the difference between calling an ability Curse or calling it May Your Axes Chip and Shatter, calling a class Spider Hunter or Slayer of the Spider Breed. Your character's background being criminal or being Wage Wars Get Rich Die Handsome. Now, all of that said, there are tons of ways to prep your game. If you don't want to use storyboards, if you prefer names that just literally tell you what a thing is, like Green Flame Blade, that's perfectly fine. I've seen games prepped like thriller horror novels, using the hero's journey, as small-town murder mysteries, leaning on star-crossed romances. And if any of those sound like your kind of game, you can see those exact games prepped in a new show called 4DMs 1 Prompt. It's one of my favorite things I've ever been a part of. You can click on it here. Never know how big these things are gonna be. Thank you for sticking around until the end of the video. It means a lot to me. Keep your pencil sharp. Show this video to your English teacher. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. Bye-bye.